TV series tracker the Notion way, using a single database for everything. Welcome! In this episode we're continuing where we left off the last time, and we're creating a TV series tracker the Notion way. What does that mean? Well, let's scroll up a little bit and look at what we did yesterday. Here we have day 40, where we created a TV series tracker the right way. We created a nice database structure containing different databases, and we linked them via relations. The problem was that Notion didn't really like that, and when we went into creating a timeline view, we got a little bit stuck. So let's use Notion's quite new feature for opening things in new tabs. We control-click this one, Command on Mac, and we look at how the tracker looked where we left off. So if we go down, we see we have 1, 2, 3 databases. The first one is the series one, where we list series. The second is seasons, where we list all the seasons. And the third one is episodes, where we list all the episodes. And everything looks great up until the timeline visualization. And where we left off, we felt that we would like to be able to expand and collapse these. And since the timeline, when we go in here, can only have one source, we can actually not link to multiple things. Let's see if we can fix this today. I'll simply control-click and drag. That creates a copy. Command-click on Mac. And we write, as usual, a few other goals for today. Today we're creating a TV series tracker the Notion way. And what does that mean? Well, to enable visualization, we want one database with everything. Timeline should work nicely, and that means that we should be able to expand seasons from a series. We should be able to expand episodes from a season. All right, so let's dig in. We go into exactly where we left off. We simply call it the Notion way. And instead of these, we create one big database to rule them all. Let's remove the timeline view for now. That's just a view. We can recreate that later as needed. And we'll go down. So we have quite a bit of information here. We don't want to lose that. Let's think about this a little bit. Right, so we want to rename the actual database here. So here's the view, here's the database name. As you can see, we can click View Database, Edit Database Title, and hide it. We can actually view it so we see it by itself. That's always good, so we know we're looking at the right thing, but we could also simply rename it here. We call this one TV Series DB. All right, so the idea then is to have all the information in one place. Let's remove these rollups, since we kind of think that those won't work anymore. If we look at what we did here, we see that this is a relation. We look at the seasons database, which we're going to remove, and some property. So remove the first air date and last air date. Great. Then we do the same going down here. So we remove first air date, we remove last air date, remove the calculated air dates property and the calculated first and last air dates properties. And if you're interested why we created a duplicate of the first and last air dates, look back in the previous episode and we'll go through every reason for everything. So here we have the episodes database finally, where we link the seasons. We won't be able to do that the same way anymore, so we'll remove that. Delete, or delete but keep the related property. So this one, if you remember, we linked both forward and back, so we delete both of them. Now this kind of collapsed itself since it contains much less data now. And finally we'll remove the seasons here, and we press delete again. So now we only have the pure data left, and as we can see, the seasons DB is not very useful anymore. I mean, it's good as a structure, but it doesn't really contain much data anymore. We started doing this rewrite to a new type of unique name. Let's do that for everything to avoid any confusion. And now we have a little bit of an issue. So we want to move all of this data to the main database above. Let's take the seasons first. So these were connected to Mad Men, I think, but let's just remove them. And as you might remember, we have this multi-select where you can drag and create a little square. And also we have a new select feature here in Notion, which is quite handy. So even if you just hover over them, you can click and select, you can click multiple. I normally find it more useful to use the square selection version, but you can combine it as you want. And if you don't like the checkboxes, you can always click on a single series that will select it, and you can shift click on the last one as usual. So you kind of get a normal selection view. It's quite hard with just one property, but I think you get the idea here. So if you click just one, then you can shift click on the last one to select all of them. All right. We'll simply remove these since they don't add much for now. And now we have 3 series. The Lazarus project, we have added 2 seasons, and for each of those seasons we have added all the episodes. Let's mark these 2 seasons and we'll move those to the TV series database as well. So as you can see, it's quite simple to drag and drop things between databases in Notion. The Seasons DB has played out its role, so let's delete that entirely. We go to View Database, we click the Page triple dot menu, and we select Delete. And it got deleted from the page as well. You can also click up here and delete, and that will delete the database. Now we have the Lazarus project, and here we actually have a bit more information. So let's try with just a single row here. We take the last one, we duplicate this one just to be extra sure. Now we created a copy of Season 2, Episode 5, and we see that in the Episodes DB we have a few columns or properties. Let's look at those. We have name, tags, and air date, which is a date, right? And if we go up to the TV series DB, we have a few properties here as well. Name, air time, not date, and tags. All right, so what happens if we then drag the Season 2, Episode 5, right? We drag it up here, 3, 2, 1, and let's drop. Okay, so what happens now? We got the name correct, airtime we didn't have before, so that's empty. But what happened with air date? Did we lose that information? As it turns out, Notion is actually quite clever. So we can go to properties and we see 2 shown, similar as before. But if we look behind here, we can see that we got a new property. So we show that, and then we see that when copying, Notion actually created a new air date property to make sure we don't lose any information. That is fantastic. So we remove this one, and now that we have tested and feel confident in this operation, we simply select all the episodes and we drag them to the top. Now we can delete this lower table, the Episodes DB. Now we click the 6-dot menu and we press delete. Great, so what's missing now is the self-referencing entities here. Now we want to recreate the relations we had previously. So we of course want to link the Lazarus project to the seasons and then in turn to the episodes. So let's do that now. We go into the options of the view or the underlying database really, and here we see sub-items, all right? So we click sub-items and we get a nice little visualization here. The idea here is that we use the same relationship both to connect the series with the seasons and to connect the season with the episodes. Either we choose the suggested sub-item and parent item, or we simply say child and parent, or something else. Let's think about this a little bit. So I normally use parent-child for this type of relationship. It normally makes most sense. Then you would have an episode that has a parent, which is a season. So let's rename these. Call this one child, and I call this one parent. And since we can obviously see that these can have multiple children, we call them children. Now we got a few more properties. We got children and we got parent. So if we look at the parent property, we can see that we have a type relation. It links to the same database. There is no limit. We want to change that. We can only have one parent season or series. And then we go back. And right now we can't do much with these. We can't really connect these. I mean, we can of course go in and we can say that, okay, Lazarus season 1, episode 1 should be connected to the parent Lazarus season 1. Okay. And now we link that and we can see that we get a little triangle here where we can expand and collapse, and we can say new sub-item. Okay, so that's interesting. What happens when we get this new sub-item or this new level? And what happens if we... So we can actually expand these all the way down. That's nice. So for season 1, let's connect all of the season 1 episodes. We simply drag them to children of season 1. I make a little bit more room so they fit on one row. And then I do the same with season 2. So I expand that and I drag them as children under season 2. Finally, I have season 1 and 2. I want those as sub-items under the Lazarus project. So I simply mark them, select them, and I drag them as children. And now we can see we have the correct structure here. That is fantastic. Already now, if we go up and create a timeline, we will see that you can expand and collapse these as needed, which is great. But we lost a little bit of information when we were fiddling around here. Previously, if you remember, we had rollups that collected the information from the episodes and put them in the seasons, and after that in the series. So let's recreate that. We have the Lazarus season 1, and we want to reach in and we want to collect the first and last air date. So we start using a rollup. We know that's what we need. We want to look in a relation. We want to look at children, and we want to select air date property. Calculate, show original. No, we don't want to do that. We want to use the earliest date. So first air date. And then we want to duplicate the property and we want to call it last air date. And then we pick the latest date. Great. All right, so what happened now? The episodes are unchanged, which is what we want. The seasons got the first air date and the last air date, and as you can see, it's the first date we have in this row of dates and the last day we have in this row of dates. It's actually this one. I'm not really sure why they are not sorted. So let's fix that. We'll sort ascending. So we first have the Lazarus project seasons 1 and 2, and now the episodes are sorted nicely. But we can see that the calculations worked as we wanted them to. Now we want to propagate this up a level. As you can see, it's not done automatically. And why is that? Well, it simply depends on that the air date property is not set for the seasons, it's only set for the episodes. And just to repeat what we realized last time, we create a rollup, we select the correct children relationship, and we look at properties, and we see that we only have air date and air time. Our rollup properties aren't here. We can't use this, so let's undo what we just did and remove that rollup column. So what we need to do here is to create a formula to simply copy these values into new properties, and then we can use rollups on them. That also means, unfortunately, that this is not a generic first air date or last air date, it's season first air date only. So let's rename it to season first air date and season last air date. So we create a formula, we call it first air date, and since this is formula, we can fix it so it's generic. We look at the formula, we pick the season first air date. As you can see here, I'm missing the most important input field here, so something is very, very strange. Let's see if we can go into the actual database and do this instead. So we edit the property, we edit the formula, and we get the same issue again. My oh my. I'm gonna see if I can fix this using the web app instead of the Windows application. Alright, so I have now switched to Chrome, to the web view of the Notion application, and let's see where we're at. So we're at the exact same place as we were before. For some reason we lost the sort. Let's add that back. And then we want to fix the first air date. So we go in as before. We have type formula, we click edit property and edit formula. And luckily now we actually get the text field here so we can work. I'm not really sure what's happening, but it's probably a temporary bug for Notion for now. We go in here, we pick season first air date as the property. We just copy the value and we then go in and we duplicate it. We create a new property called last air date. We edit the formula. Instead of season first air date, we pick season last air date and we go back. Great, so not much happened here. If we expand here, we can see that season 1 is filled with both the rollup and the formula for season first air date and first air date. And now when we have a formula column, we can use that formula column in the rollup. And there are two ways to go about fixing this now. So the first, most natural one is to create another column. We call that rollup, and we say that we want to use relation children again. And now all of a sudden we can pick the computed properties, the calculated properties, first air date and last air date. So we pick the first air date and we say calculate earliest date. Now we can see here for the Lazarus project where everything is set, we collapse this one a little bit, where everything is set here, we can see that it calculates the rollup property correctly to June 16, 2022. The problem if you do this is that for every hierarchical level you add more and more properties. So there is another way to do this, and that has to do with these two calculated columns. So first we created rollups, then we created calculated columns, and then we created rollup again. If we remove the last rollup and we rewrite this a little bit, we actually want to use the formula column first. So we want to pick up values either from the air date, if that is available, and if not, we want to pick up from the rollup columns. So let's try to fix that. So we create a little space here and we start with the if statement. So we check if not empty, and what should not be empty? Well, the air date, this one. So we click air date and we close the two parentheses, and if the air date is not empty, then we want to use the air date. If it is empty, we want to use the season first air date. So when you create formulas, remember to always count the parentheses. So we have 1, 2, 3, and we have 1, 2, 3 closing ones. And if you want to kind of debug these statements, I highly recommend using something like Visual Studio Code or some other code editor which is good at counting parentheses. And this is more or less a JavaScript syntax. You can use any kind of syntax highlighter for JavaScript and this will mostly work at least. Anyway, we now finalized our formula here. Just to revisit it, if the air date is not empty, we want to pick the air date property. If it is empty, so else, we want to pick the season first air date. Let's see what happened now. So for first air date, all of a sudden we got values for everything here. Before, we only had values for the rollup column here, as you can see for the last air date. So let's make the same change here. We could of course copy this, but to practice a bit, we start from 0. So if not empty, air date, close parentheses, then pick air date, else pick season last air date. Okay, and close the entire if statement and we're done. So now we have all the values we want here, but we can see that they don't roll up all the way to the series. Let's think about this a little bit. So what are we trying to do here? Well, we said we were going to change these around, so let's do that visually as well. That always helps me think in the right way. And if you are a bit annoyed that these wrap, you can either go into the column and you can say wrap column off, or you can go into the entire view and you can say layout and wrap all columns off. So now everything is forced to be on a single line, which is nice when doing these types of things. First we calculate these first air date and last air date, and as you can see it's simply copying the values it has in the air date column. And then we want to use the rollup. So to clarify this will actually be the children first air date, and this will be the children last air date, since we want this all the way down. Then we need to change the rollup formula here. So we go into the pen here and we look at the relation children property air date, and instead we select first air date. Then we can have first air date and we show original or date range or whatever, and same as before we say earliest date. And for children last air date we go in here, we look at last air date, the calculated property, and latest date. Alright, so let's see what we ended up with here. So we have the air dates, it's copied over to first and last air date, and then that's rolled up to the season level. These are then copied over to the first and last air date for the season, which means that they can then be picked up by the rollups for the series level. So these ones are picked up here, so we can see that if we close this one, we can see that June 16, 2022 is the first air date for season 1, and last air date is July 21, 2023, which is the last air date for season 2. So this actually picks up the entire range. Now we have all the data, meaning we are ready to create our timeline view. Right, so let's see if we can create some space. Oh, we're in the TV series DB, we back out, then we create some space here and we say /view, and we go down a little bit, click timeline view, select TV series DB, and we have our timeline. New empty view, timeline, show database title, we can remove that. And now we have this very important property here, show timeline by. And as we remember from the last episode, we want to separate start and end dates. We pick first air date, which is the computed property, and we pick last air date, which is the second computed property, which we saw is filled for the entire table. So it will work across all levels. We want to show table just to make sure we don't miss anything. And we can choose center peak just to get a little bit of change going here. And as you can see now, since we're referencing the same database, the sub-items has already been chosen. So everything should actually already be set up. Let's try that out. So we see the Lazarus project. We are very happy to see that it spans its entire length. We can select yearly view so we get a bit better of an overview, and we can see here that it goes all the way from 2022 in June all the way up to 2023 in July. We also wanted the feature working to be able to expand and collapse, and here we can see season 1 was expanded. What happens if we scroll right here? We see season 2 as well. It's fantastic. What happens if we expand here? We can see that all the episodes are spaced here 1 week apart, and we see that the season is spanning the entire range of the episodes. We collapse those. We go all the way over here to season 2. You can also press these little arrows to quickly go to one side or the other. We expand, and we can see again that the episodes are here. And it seems like we didn't manage to fix the air dates correctly here, so that's something we can go in here and fix. So we click on season 5. Our guess is that this air date should be, let's see, this air date should be the week before. This air date should be the week after. Okay, so now that we've fixed that, we can see everything looks as expected. Great, and the nice thing with the timeline view is that now we're looking at a yearly view. We can easily go in and we can say that we want to look at a monthly view, and then go back to the season 1 Lazarus project. Sorry about that. Go into Lazarus project season 1, and now we see with a lot higher resolution what is going on here. Very nice. The last thing we can do now that we have everything very nicely laid out in the timeline is to create a calendar view. So we have a calendar view. We point to the same TV series database. We say we want to create a new empty view, and we'll remove database title, show calendar by. Now we can only choose one date. We choose the first air date, similar to before. We close this, and now all of a sudden we can see here that this is today, and whenever we start to approach the air date of the next season of Lazarus project, we will start seeing them here. That's great. Just to be able to see this a little bit better, I'm gonna switch on full page width view. So we see them here. So we see season 2 is starting, and we also see the respective episodes here. The nice thing with this is that you will be able to keep up with whatever interesting TV series is upcoming the next couple of weeks, and you can plan your binge watching accordingly. That was all I had for you today. So today we transformed the nice triple database structure we had before to a single database that contains all the hierarchy levels needed to create a TV series database. We have the episodes, we have the seasons, and we have the series themselves. We aggregate those and we create a timeline view so we can see it easily over time, and we also create a calendar view so we can see all the upcoming things. The next episode we will be cleaning this up a little bit, making it a little bit more pretty to look at. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell icon so you don't miss that episode. Thank you very much for joining, and have a nice day. See you next time.